The quickest and easiest way to improve your writing is to take advantage of verbs. By that, I mean doing away with many thought structures and avoiding unnecessary adjectives and adverbs in favor of the appropriate verb. Let's consider thought structures first. We're talking about the simple verbs used to communicate emotions. John hated apples. Mary loved John. And don't be fooled by the length here. John hated apples because they tasted sour and reminded him of home, and Mary loved John and the way he looked at her are both the same thing. It's not about the length or the lack of complexity, it's about the telling. We don't see John eating apples. We don't feel Mary loving John. We're just told that's how it is. Take the example, Jamie hated the smell of the coffee Sharon brewed each morning. Could we take that hated and make the reader feel it? Instead of that, we could write, Jamie shuffled his way into the kitchen and grimaced once the hint of coffee reached his nostrils. He shot Sharon an over-the-shoulder glance. He rolled his eyes and sighed. Why couldn't she just wait to drink that crap when he was out of the house? For one, this version gives the reader a close and personal look at what Jamie's feeling. But some of the chosen verbs enhance the prose as well. Shot, for example, communicates that Sharon is the immediate target of his annoyance. It's accusatory. It's hostile. In short, verbs are very useful. You know that saying, a picture says 1,000 words? Well, I would say a good verb can save you at least several dozen words. Because a lot of the things you might be tempted to describe using adjectives, to emphasize using adverbs, to state using thought structures, could be done a lot faster and cleaner with verbs. Let's say you have a character entering a bar, and you want the reader to get the impression that this is some super-duper sexy femme fatale. Do you need to start by describing the tightness of her dress and how it barely covers her butt? Not really. It's enough that you use the verb sachet to describe her movement, given what we associate it with. This is going to have an impact on the reader, and it will prime them to imagine the character as confident, self-assured, sexy, regardless of what she's wearing or what she looks like. Which, by the way, isn't to say that it's forbidden to mention her outfit or to describe her as sexy directly. But somebody could wear a tight dress and still not be sexy, especially if they don't feel sexy from your prose. For example, between she entered wearing a sexy red dress, went to the bar and sat down, and she slipped in, sashayed over to the bar, and perched herself on a high stool. Which do you think better engaged your imagination and painted a clearer image? Because for me, it's definitely the latter. An author appealing to such a simplistic way to define a character as sexy by saying that she's wearing a sexy red dress would honestly just really bore me. But let's look at that second example a bit. Using slipped gives the impression that this is a smooth operator, perhaps a person who is slender or physically adept. Her sashaying over to the bar gives off titillating vibes. And the fact that she perches herself on a high stool alludes to the fact that she wants to be perceived by as many eyes as possible. Even if you knew nothing at all about this character, not her personality, not her appearance, not even her name, I guarantee you'd be 1,000,000 times more likely to imagine a sexy woman wearing a dress than an old babushka in a headscarf because of the mental association you have with these verbs. And one of the many benefits to portraying the character in this way is they don't come off as a creep enamored with women's body parts and clingy fabrics. It's less objectifying, yet it does a far better job. There's no need for lengthy physical descriptions or long lists of physical characteristics when the movements and actions of the character speak for themselves. As far as adverbs go, their overabundance is not a good sign. A lot of the times you see people using adverbs not because they have a specific reason for doing so, but because they don't know the appropriate verb they should use. So instead of swagger down the street, you get walked confidently down the street. Or take, he got out of bed and walked slowly to the kitchen. That's fine, but you could also improve it significantly by writing, he crawled out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen. Or consider another example. Alex looked fiercely at his bully, but in the very next moment, the bully pushed his cap off and laughed cruelly. Could we improve this by getting rid of the adverbs and replacing them with proper verbs? The answer is yes. Alex stared his bully down, but in the very next moment, the bully flicked his cap off and chortled. This paints a way clearer image. To begin with, we get an idea of Alex's intense resolve. But more importantly, the fact that the bully flicks his cap off and then chortles paints a way more vivid image of the bully himself. The dismissiveness of Flick emphasizes both the power differential between them and the complete disdain felt by the bully towards Alex. And while chortle could be replaced with other laughter verbs, the reason I went for it is because it's an ugly sounding word that I feel emphasized the nasty, brutish nature of this character. We could even take a romantic scene. You want to say a guy is lying in bed and his girlfriend gets on top of him and starts teasing him. So you write, Alice jumped on top of him, putting a leg on either side of his torso and moved back and forth teasingly. Let's go out, she said hotly. Now what if we took that awkward sounding text and just added in the right verbs? Alice mounted her boyfriend and straddled him between her legs. She grinded against him. Let's go out, she cooed. The difference between these two, at least to me, is astronomical. Really. But, internet man, I don't know all these verbs, you might say. And that's okay. I didn't know them either. Some of them you might never hear in a normal day-to-day talk if you don't grow up with people with an expansive vocabulary. And if you're not a native English speaker, then you know the pain of being cursed with a Byzantine vocabulary full of cryptic academic terms you might see once or twice, while lacking an arsenal of everyday nouns and verbs. But that's not unfixable. The point is that you make an effort to learn as many verbs as possible, like a serious effort. And there's nothing wrong with having a list open of basic verbs for different actions. You should definitely start by mastering movement and speech verbs. Knowing how and when to use verbs like clamber, shuffle, mount, straddle, teetered, cooed, boomed, snapped, and many others is going to enhance your writing in ways you've never even imagined. Again, starting with verbs for movement and speech is probably your best bet. From there, you can move on to more specific actions. Unlike most things in writing that might be subjective or difficult to improve upon without a lot of practice, this is something that could immediately elevate your writing from all right to good or even very good. And if you haven't really thought about verbs in this way, I'd recommend easy practice. Take an old story you wrote, get past the cringe of reading or bad writing, and then start. Take away the adverbs and see if you can find a better, more specific verb to use in those instances. Then, look at your descriptions. Is there a dynamic way you could emphasize the same traits about that character using related verbs? It might be hard at first, and if you need help, I'd honestly recommend our AI overlords. Just paste in your sentence and ask them, what kind of verb do you think would work here? The point is to get out of the habit of relying on adverbs and adjectives all the time, and to heighten the dynamism and immediacy, and really the overall quality of your text with careful verb selection. I think you'll be amazed at what a huge difference this makes.